Hello, welcome to the Mission Driven Business Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Thompson, an attorney, certified financial planner, and founder of a financial planning firm that serves LGBTQ entrepreneurs. I created this podcast to help mission-driven entrepreneurs build businesses that are both profitable and meaningful. On the show, you'll hear conversations from diverse entrepreneurs and experts who support small businesses in many, many ways. We'll talk about marketing, money, strategy, mindset, and what it really takes to build a business that aligns with your values and supports the life that you want. So whether you're just getting started or growing an established business, you're in the right place. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mission Driven Business Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Thompson, and happy Pride Month. Happy Pride Month. Happy Pride Month. As many of you know, supporting LGBTQ entrepreneurs and the LGBT community in general is a huge part of my business and central to the work I do. So I love Pride Month. I love celebrating. I love being out there. But I also want to make sure that we aren't just doing this once a month. It's not just a June thing for me. I want to make sure that I show up, I lead in a way, I live in a way, and I create a space for people to feel like themselves year round. And I hope you're doing that too. I think that spirit connects deeply with today's conversation because building a sustainable business often requires us to not shrink ourselves, to not hide who we are, or to try to fit expectations that we were never built to really fill in the first place. And I know this topic may sound a bit personal or on the surface, but it's also deeply strategic. While authenticity is often discussed in emotional and personal terms, I found that it has a real impact on leadership, on marketing, on sustainability, and the overall health of your business. Over the years, both in my journey and with working with entrepreneurs, I've noticed how many people spend an incredible amount of energy trying to be a version of themselves that they feel will be more acceptable, more professional, or successful. And sometimes that looks like softening parts of our personality, or code switching, or avoiding stories that may feel like will give people a different perspective than we want them to have, or that we think that we should have. And for many people with marginalized identities, that calculation is constant. And even beyond identity, I think most entrepreneurs understand what it feels like to wonder if people really saw me, would they still want to work with me? Or if I don't show up in this way, people won't work with me at all. And that fear can shape how we market, how visible we are, how we allow ourselves to become visible, or even the kind of business that we build in the first place. So today, I want to explore the emotional exhaustion that comes from masking, how hiding affects leadership and marketing, why authenticity creates stronger alignment, and the difference between safety and self-erasure, and what it means to build a business that is genuinely for yourself. So let's get into it. One of the hardest things about hiding parts of yourself is it can become so normalized that you stop noticing how much energy it's taking. You begin to assume this is just what it looks like to be professional, or this is what leadership looks like. This is what successful people do. But masking takes work and energy. It requires constant self-monitoring, thinking about how you sound, how you appear, what you should share, what you shouldn't share, and how other people might interpret you. I imagine you felt a lot of this if you were in the LGBT community as you were growing up, because you always had to monitor yourself. And as we discussed in previous episodes, entrepreneurs are already carrying around a lot of emotional and mental baggage when trying to figure out how they're going to run their business. And then when you layer self-protection on top of that, it can become extremely exhausting. I know early in my career, there were definitely environments where I felt pressure to compartmentalize myself in order to be taken seriously. As a younger professional, as a gay professional, as a Black professional, there were moments when I felt very aware of how I was being perceived and whether I fit people's expectations of what professionalism was supposed to look like. To be clear, some of that pressure is real. There are real biases and systems that exist in professional spaces that are not for us. So safety matters and context matters. This conversation isn't about forcing yourself to be vulnerable in every environment or pretending like there are no consequences to vulnerability. But I do think there's a difference between making thoughtful decisions to protect yourself and slowly disconnecting from yourself entirely, forgetting who you are. Over time, that chronic masking creates distance between you and the people you are trying to connect with. And you can start to lose your own voice, your creativity, your intuition, and how you can relate to those people that you really want to connect with. And eventually, you may find yourself with a business that looks successful externally, but feels emotionally disconnected internally. One thing I've learned over the years is that people don't just connect with expertise anymore. Yes, they want to know that you're skilled and that you can do the work, but they also want to connect with your humanity. Just last week, I had a prospect ask about my why of starting my business. I'm getting more and more of those questions about mission, vision, and values than I ever had before, especially now when people are under constant chaos and threat and are flooded with information and polished branding and curated versions of success. What many people are looking for is actual resonance. They want to feel heard. They want to feel understood. They want to trust the person behind the business. And they can only do that if they know who you are. That connection becomes difficult if you are constantly filtering yourself. I see this show up all the time, especially in marketing. A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with visibility, not because they lack expertise, but because being visible feels emotionally risky. And we have all these fears around judgment and acceptance. So it becomes very polished and overly corporate and intentionally vague in who we're presenting to the world. But as a reminder, you are not for everyone. And being who you are can be a magnet for those who are essential and a good fit for you, and repellent for those who aren't. One of the biggest shifts in my own business happened when I stopped trying to sound like a version of a financial advisor that I thought people expected. I started trying to use my actual authentic voice, my curiosity, my values, my perspective, and have the kinds of conversations that I really just enjoyed having. And refining my niche to LGBTQ entrepreneurs felt intimidating at first because there's always that lingering fear of limiting my scope would limit my opportunities. But what I found instead was alignment. The right people found me faster, the conversations became deeper, and the work became more fulfilling. And I realized that I spent far less energy trying to convince people that I was the right fit for them when we just sort of knew that we should be working together. And that's one thing that I think authenticity does well. It builds clarity faster. But I do know like authenticity is one of those words that is often overused. So I don't necessarily want to overlook a proper definition of it. When I say authenticity, I mean alignment. That's the feeling of who you are, what you value, and how you lead all come together in the business that you're running. When there's a major disconnection between those things, it becomes difficult to sustain over time. So don't make it hard on yourself. We want businesses that build more freedom, more ownership, more purpose, and more alignment. So we should build those businesses. And if we end up building businesses that we still feel like we have to perform, that starts to wear on us, both emotionally and physically and mentally. And eventually the business will become something that you don't even recognize and definitely don't want. One thing I've noticed is that authenticity often creates better boundaries as well. If you know who you are, you get clear on your own values and how you operate, and you naturally attract clients and collaborators and other opportunities that are aligned with who you want to be in the world. So again, it's really about clarity. Your message becomes clear, your decision-making becomes clear, your relationships become clear. And most importantly, you stop spending energy maintaining an image that isn't really you. That doesn't mean that fear will completely disappear. I still experience visibility fear all the time. I still question myself about whether I'm sharing too much or not enough. Most likely too much for me. But I remind myself that people want me as I am. And alignment feels more sustainable than constant performance, I think. I also want to make the important distinction that I referred to before, that authenticity can be overly simplified, and um, people could come to think it means visibility in every single way. There are real professional, financial, and physical risks to deciding how visible you want to be, especially for us LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs. So this isn't about pressuring you to disclose more than you think is necessary or safe. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to you. But I do think it's worth asking, am I protecting myself or am I abandoning myself? Those are very different things. And sometimes self-erasure becomes so habitual that we stop recognizing it. Maybe it looks like avoiding your perspective entirely, or it could be continue to work with clients who fundamentally drain you. Or maybe it's building a business that no longer feels emotionally connected to who you are and who you want to be. Over time, that disconnection adds up. And one of the gifts of entrepreneurship is that we get to create whatever we want. We get to ask, what kind of work do we want to do? Who do I want to serve? What kind of life am I trying to create? And how do I want this business to feel? I think emotional sustainability is an important part of all of these questions. And that's why we're focusing on building with intention and with alignment. One of the biggest shifts for me as I've developed my business is moving away from asking myself, what should my business look like? And instead asking what feels aligned for me. That mindset shift, I think, changes a lot because there are endless models of success online, endless strategies, endless opinions about what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. But true sustainability often comes back to self-awareness, doing the internal work. Again, you get to build whatever you want. Understanding your energy, your strengths, your communication styles, your values, and the kind of work that genuinely feels like you is what you can do in your business. And for me, that's why this podcast exists. I genuinely love these conversations. I enjoy exploring the emotional and strategic side of entrepreneurship and topics like purpose, identity, leadership, sustainability, alongside financial planning, because God knows I love a spreadsheet. Allowing more of all of that into my business has made the work feel more meaningful and more connected to who I am. College Brian would be so excited that his philosophy major is serving him well in his business. And again, it's not going to be easier, but it'll be more honest. And I think people will be able to feel that honesty. The businesses that resonate most deeply often are those businesses that feel more human. Not perfect, not super slick branding, but human. So if you've been feeling disconnected from your business or exhausted by visibility or uncertain about your voice, it could be worth asking, where am I performing? Where am I minimizing myself? And what could it look like to build a business that feels a little bit more aligned? So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with a couple questions. What part of yourself have you been minimizing in your business? And what might change if you allowed yourself a little bit more visibility and self-assurance? Not in a performative way, not at all at once, and again, not unsafely, but honestly and intentionally. Because I truly believe that sustainable leadership comes from alignment. From building businesses where we can breathe, where we can lead with integrity, and where we can connect deeply with people we actually want to serve. Being yourself in your business doesn't guarantee success, but it builds a better foundation than having a business where you're constantly performing and then constantly exhausted. That alignment matters for everyone, but especially mission-driven entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Mission Driven Business Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with another entrepreneur who you think might need to hear it. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, please leave a review. and share the episode on social media so more people can find these helpful conversations. Until next time, keep building a business and a life that feels more like you. Thank you for listening to the Mission Driven Business Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Thompson. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you know another entrepreneur who could benefit from this conversation, please share it with them. Until next time, keep building a business that creates both profit and purpose.